Hey, Dave from Sage Garden here. We just wrapped up session 1 of our 28-day Indoor Garden Challenge launch. We're just about to do round 2, but if you couldn't make it down, we've got all kinds of resources to check out from today. We've captured all the important moments, so if you want to learn how to do your own 28-day Indoor Garden Challenge greens, just check out the video we got going for you today. Thank you for being here. Really excited. It's our 4th year of doing this project, and it all started because I get to talk to tons of gardeners who are kind of lamenting that weird moment of February where we're like, I want to grow something. The types of things that work well for this are baby greens. They're like lettuces and kales and things like that. And the reason we choose those types of seeds is because they can grow to maturity very, very quickly. So typically when you're looking at a pack of seeds and it's like a lettuce or a baby green, what you generally find is it'll say something like 21 to 28 days for baby greens. But the important information here is these are annual type plants that develop into nice little bits of very tasty greenery in a very short time frame. So what do you really need to make this project happen? So you definitely need to have some seeds that are viable. Around this time of the year, people are often asking me, if I have some old seed packets kicking around in my drawers, can I actually plant those, or are they just expired? And lettuce seeds and kale seeds and the kinds of things that are well suited to this project actually tend to last for a number of years. So if you find you've got some packets of things that you've just got in your back drawer somewhere filed away, I would definitely go ahead and try to plant those because they likely will germinate for you. So the 3 key factors include choosing the right kinds of seeds and having enough light and having the right kind of soil. So those are the 3 things that are really important. So we've talked a little bit about the seeds. What about the brightness? And in Manitoba, we're fortunate because we happen to have quite a sunny winter situation. So oftentimes, somewhere in your house, you have that one window at least that you feel is like a nice bright spot. That would be the kind of location that's going to be well suited to this project, somewhere where you really feel like the energy of the sun kind of concentrates a little bit for your plants to grow. If you wanted to grow things a little bit faster, you can definitely substitute the sunshine with artificial grow lights. And the one good thing about grow lights compared to the sunshine is that you can control them throughout the whole year. So if you get inspired and you decide this is something you want to have available to you any month of the year, whether it's November, December, January, February, the grow lights can open that opportunity up, whereas natural daylight really isn't strong enough to support awesome seedling growth in lettuces and things like that in November, December, January. It's just going to be kind of slow and kind of weaker. So if you're interested in grow lights, I'll just briefly mention, you're looking at what's called the spectrum of the light. And so the spectrum is the quality of the light in terms of the colors that are in it. So full spectrum lighting is as if it was 2 p.m. in June. And all of us would like that, right? Like we'd like to be hanging out in 2 p.m. in June perpetually. And that's measured in what's something called Kelvin units. So when you're looking for grow lighting, you want to find Kelvin units, which is represented by the letter K, and you want to look for 6400 K. The second thing you want to look for if you're going to set up a grow light of some kind is how many watts are involved. And so the wattage tells you a lot about how much electricity is going to be consumed. So wattage gives you a clue about how many lights you can plug into an outlet, for example. And lumens is the light energy available to your plants. If you have lots of lumens and you have the right spectrum, then your plants are going to be really, really happy with you. So lumens are often measured in around 900 to 3000 per light. And it's cumulative. So if you put together a few lights that have a certain number of lumens, it cumulatively augments the amount of lumens available for your plants. And generally speaking, the more lumens, the more quickly your plants will grow. So if you're looking at grow lights, those are the 3 things to look at. The next thing we want to consider is what kind of containers are we going to use? So what I would say, first of all, is almost any kind of container that actually has drainage holes in the bottom is perfect for this project. And you'll notice that the containers I have as examples here are very shallow. You really only need about 1.5 inches of soil to grow the baby greens. So that's kind of another big difference between this project and something you do in your outdoor garden, or if you're starting seedlings for springtime and transplanting them up. Here, you only need about this much room for the soil. So any kind of container with drainage holes that has about 2 inches of depth is awesome. So what about temperature? The kinds of plants that I was talking about here, so kales and lettuces and things like that, these are what are called cool season vegetables or cool season greens. And it is an important consideration. If you wanted to grow things all year round indoors, sometimes if you grow lettuces and other kinds of cool season crops in a very warm spot in your house, even if you had grow lights and things, what you can find is they get leggy, and that's a sure sign that it's too warm for those plants. If you are doing this in a bright windowsill, bright windowsills are going to warm up through force of the solar energy that comes in, but they're actually cooler than room temperature for sure. There's quite a lot of heat loss just by force of that big space that's not as well insulated as your walls. So generally speaking, you're going to have the coolness that you require in a nice bright location near a window. But I would say the ideal location for this would be somewhere that's maybe more like 18 degrees or less, which a nice bright window typically is, even if your thermostat is set at 21 or 22. On the other hand, if you love the idea of growing something like summer herbs like basil or dill, then that tends to be something that requires more of a warmer kind of location. So in that case, you could choose that very warm, cozy spot you have, or you can't stop the heat coming from the radiator, so therefore you can put your basil and your dill right there. One of the things, if you're out sort of seed shopping for this type of project, cilantro is a popular one. It's a love it or hate it one though, so we could have organized the room this way, right? Genovese basil, so that would be like your classic Italian style basil. Has anyone ever had sorrel before? Yeah, what would you say about sorrel? It tastes great. That's a very succinct answer. I love it. Arugula, very tasty. So if you like things that are a little bit piquant, arugula, just like a lot of these things, is a cool season crop. A very popular thing lately are open-flowered broccolis. So that would be broccolis that don't form tight heads. They're so much easier to grow than regular type broccolis. But it's fun to grow edible flowers indoors like this way too. So this is a nasturtium. And last but not least, another neat option for something slightly different from your average salad greens is the bunching onions. And bunching onions are really easy to grow. You don't have to wait for them to form a bulb at all. You can grow them any time of the year. In fact, some people just take their green onions from the grocery store, re-sprout them after they've harvested most of the plant, and then get them to grow back, and then harvest them, get them to grow back. So bunching onions are a really worthwhile thing to have indoors in the winter because they really are easy. And they could be on a windowsill, they could be under lights, and they remain productive. So there's a couple of ways you can go about watering things. So one of them is you could actually use a bottom watering technique where you could use something like it's called a capillary mat, which is basically like a felted kind of a mat. And when you set your trays on it and you let this sit into a little reservoir of water, it actually soaks water up through the bottom, and it's completely passive. As long as you've added water to the reservoir, it's going to soak water up, and it's never going to overwater your soil. A more simplified version of that is you could actually water your plants from the bottom by just having your containers with drainage set into a little basin and let them soak up water for about 20 minutes, and then take them out of the little basin and put them back to where they're growing. So the last thing I'll say about watering is if you are going to water from the top because you're used to that technique, try hard to water around the plants as opposed to right on top of the plants. That'll definitely be better for them. As for frequency of watering, the early phase is kind of important because when the seeds are germinating, if they start to germinate and then they suddenly dry out, that tends to put a stop to their development, right? So we want to make sure that they're well watered at the beginning, but we don't want to have it saturated in such a way that they get soggy. So what I like to do is get used to using my finger, and so we can kind of stick our finger in. I'll pass this around. This one's well watered. You can definitely feel moisture on my fingertip right away when I touch the top. That would mean check on it today, come back to it tomorrow, do another test. If it feels still wet on top, come back to it the next day. I predict for young seedlings at this stage, you're going to water it about every 3 days. As the plants grow, you actually have to water a little bit more frequently because they're going to be putting on a lot more leafy development. And as that happens, they also give off a lot more water through the course of the day. So by the end of your 28-day challenge, you're probably going to be watering them every 2 days as opposed to every 3 or 4 days. At Sage Garden, all of the things we do, all the growing we do always starts with a compost-based soil. And so the soil that we recommend and that we're going to help mix up today is basically peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, kelp, and then worm compost. There's already some worm compost in this soil, but because we want things to grow really kind of intensively, we're going to add extra. So I need a volunteer who would like to roll up their sleeves and get into some mud for a sec. Here's our handy bag of worm compost, upside down bag of worm compost. So you can put your hands in there. Are you familiar with worm compost? Yeah, you know all about it. So the worm compost is going to help to encourage even soil moisture because it's going to absorb water and slow release it back out. The other thing is, of course, it's loaded with nutrients, and those nutrients are very, very available to your plants. So the young plants that are still developing a root system and sort of getting used to doing photosynthesis are able to take advantage of the nutrients from worm compost much more quickly than other types of compost. So what we need to do is we're going to just basically open this bag up, and there. Going to do it so beautifully and delicately here. So if you could empty about half the bag into the bin here. All right, so next up, we want to add about 15% worm compost. And we're not going to measure, we're just going to kind of eyeball it here a little bit. But we just want to incorporate that really nicely and blend it in. Feels really good. That looks awesome. And again, I get to talk to so many gardeners. I'm so lucky. And I would definitely say that a strong, strong theme among gardeners at this time of the year is the therapeutic benefits of gardening, right? Like, this feels good. We do, like at Sage Garden, we try to prioritize organic wherever we can. So we have only organic soils, and they have good things in them. But we still like to make them even better sometimes. And for this purpose, we want to really build that nutrients in there. So yeah, so thank you very much. That was awesome. Yeah. So basically, you're going to fill it up to just about here. So you're going to leave about an inch or 3/4 of an inch of space between where the soil ends and the top. And one thing that's a common temptation, I notice when people are filling up trays, they want to kind of compact the soil down. I'd like you to loosely fill it and just maybe like tap it so the soil kind of levels out. But we don't want to like cram it in there. So please go ahead and be my guest. Get to play in the dirt. Oftentimes, packets of greens like this will have about that quantity, about 150 seeds. And that's a good quantity to grow into an 11 by 11 tray. And so then what I like to do then is I just sort of take my other hand and I just kind of sprinkle them as evenly as I can, just to kind of distribute them. And you'll find they just sort of stick in the soil, and it'll be all very good. So just sprinkle it around, and away you go. Awesome. Like a professional. Yeah. What I love about these types of projects is that really and truly, once you've done it a couple times, it's just so easy. So I encourage you to tell your friends about doing this, because it's really rewarding. So beautiful. So that's that. So this then will go into the bright location. So it could be in your window. It doesn't have to have light at first. So until you start to see those little seedlings popping up, you don't have to have it necessarily somewhere light. But as soon as you see little signs of green, you want to move it to the brightest location you have, or put it under your grow lights. And literally, for these kinds of seeds, it'll take about 2 to 3 days before you see little signs of greenery. And then literally, this is after 2 weeks. So it's pretty fast. It's pretty awesome.